Hey everybody, Travis over at Traverse Music here. Today we're going to video number 2 of our StewMac build. We're going to take care of this headstock. We'll see you after the intro. Hey everybody, just a friendly reminder, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so that you get notifications whenever these next videos come out. And without further ado, here we go. All right, I got my StewMac neck, and there's a few things that I've been thinking about doing on this neck, just in case you're wondering. These frets are very small, they're very vintage, and I like vintage, but I like vintage on vintage. I don't like vintage on new, if that makes any sense at all. It does in my brain, and it's my guitar, so what I say goes. Anyways, I haven't decided yet, but I think what I want to do is pull these frets and put some medium-sized frets on here, but that's not what this video today is about. So we still have another video to think about. With that being said, what we're gonna do is we're gonna design a headstock shape, we're gonna cut that out, we're gonna sand it up, I'm gonna show you guys how to do those things. There's only a few things you need to worry about when you're designing your headstock shape, and then we'll show you kind of the best way to cut them out. The things I'm using today are going to be a pencil. This is number 2. You can use your number 1 or 3. We're going to use some sort of blade, and that's just simply to get this plastic nut out of here. We're going to be using a bandsaw. We're probably going to use an oscillating sander, and then we're gonna just use a bunch of hand sandpaper after that. So let's get going. So I was talking with my buddy Austin, and I was thinking of going real sleek. So when we were talking about designs, I was thinking about something kind of like this. And I loop around here, and then I kind of give it this offset-y vibe since it is an offset body. And we come down here, boom. And this is okay. There's a couple things to think about when you're designing a headstock. If you want string trees, which you probably will, at least for these two, you gotta leave room for here. You also need room for a logo. If you want 2 sets of string trees, you definitely need a bunch of room. And then also just going with too much material right next to a tuner is sometimes bad if you don't have strong enough wood. I'm not really worried about that. I think we have enough room for all those things that I talked about, but I just wasn't digging this design. I don't think it looks that great. And he said, well, why don't you go bigger and kind of go wider? So then I started drawing a nice big wide headstock. And he said, oh, that's cool, so you're gonna bevel it here. And I said, no. And then I decided, well, actually, let's do that. So I know a lot of people online tend to go with these bevel headstocks. They're unique, they're neat, they're not super easy to do if you're brand new to woodworking, but if you've done woodworking in the past, they're actually pretty darn easy. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna go with a beveled headstock. So what we see here is this outside line is going to be our cut mark when we get to the bandsaw. We're gonna cut all this material away. And then we're gonna put this in a vise, and we're gonna have to really just tear away material right here throughout this entire area. When we tear all that material away, we're gonna have this concave area here where we have this beveled edge, and it's gonna be pretty cool. And then when we go back to paint it, this part will be painted, this part won't be painted, and we'll show you how to do that also. So, really cool design. Thank you, Austin, for helping out with that. I think this is gonna be neat, it's gonna be unique. We still have room for our Traverse Guitars logo. And we got room for our string trees. So, how about we take this bad boy on over to the bandsaw? All right, so what I'm using is a bandsaw. This is a big Rikon one. I absolutely love this thing. Setting up a bandsaw and having it set up properly is super important when you're cutting out bodies and necks and things like that. I've used jigsaws in the past. That is something you can use. You see I have safety glasses on. I have my canvas apron on. I'm gonna put some ear pro on before we start as well, which is right behind me. What we're gonna do, we'll cut this out. We'll take a look at it, what it looks like afterward, and then we'll see what we need to do for sanding. Let's go. So as you can see, there's not a lot of just beauty in this rough cut, and that's exactly what it is a rough cut. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring you over to my oscillating sander, and we're gonna actually smooth all of this out so we get that exact shape we're looking for. So let's go. This is my Triton oscillating sander. I fell in love with Triton tools after watching Crimson Guitars do some really cool stuff. I use their routers for both my table and my hand routing, and I actually use their oscillating sander as well. Fantastic tools for the price. I think you just can't beat it for the money. This turns in from a belt oscillating to a single oscillator. I'm gonna see what happens with the belt on right now, but what we're gonna do is just try to smooth all this stuff out. So let's go. All right, so our rough cut is all done. We got some great edges here, and it's not perfectly smooth from that. That's about 120 grit. It's just looking to take off material quickly. I got a little point here I don't really like. There's just some smooth sanding that needs to happen on this, but overall, I think we did a really good job. Now, there's a couple of ways to attack this next part. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna end up putting this in a vise, and then we're gonna use a rasp to get this edging away. I'm not sanding this smooth first for a couple of reasons. So the first reason is we have a bunch of space here that we're gonna end up sanding, making perfect, and then we're gonna rasp a bunch of it off, and we just spent all that time sanding this perfect, when if we rasp it first and then we sand it afterward, we're not sanding all this for no reason at all. That's really the biggest reason why. It doesn't make sense to sand a bunch of stuff you're gonna remove, so always save the sanding like that until the very end. So I have two rasps here. One is obviously taken off a ton. This is the Shinto. This is the Japanese rasp that everybody absolutely loves. I do love this as well. Before I bought this, I was at a local woodcraft and they talked me into buying this. It's a little more expensive. I'm not sure how to pronounce this name. It's Liogier. It's spelled L-I-O-G-I-E-R. Every single one of these little rasps is actually hammered out. So this is hand hammered, and it's a great tool. It doesn't take off the necessary material to not have this still. I'm gonna start with this one in the spots that I know I need to take a lot of space, a lot of wood off, and then we're going to move to this one where we get into the tight corners and things like that. Let's go. So I know I said I'm starting with the Shinto. I'm actually gonna start with this one. I'm gonna use the curved edge, and we're just gonna start taking away material. A lot of people don't know this either, but the Shinto has a fine side and a rough side. We're gonna start with the fine side, see how that goes. If it's not going well enough, we're gonna move over to the rough side. So you see that's a much rougher cut. We did switch to the deeper side. I just wanted to take off stuff quickly before I switch back over to my other rasp. And now I can start removing this at a little finer pace here. So you can see how far we've gotten already. It's only been a couple minutes. This is going very smoothly. The biggest thing to keep in mind is we don't want to go all the way down to exactly where we want our cut to start. I put my line about where I want this to be. So I want to go to my line. I'm going to hand sand this too. When you're thinking about your curve, when you're thinking about the angle and stuff like that, you need to be thinking about that stuff now so that you don't go too much of an angle, too light of an angle, whatever the case is, so that when you go to your hand sanding, you have room to correct things. I felt this would be a big wide angle here, and then it will sharpen again here. It's nice and sharp, goes wide, and then we're going to sharpen it again. So that's the goal I'm going for if you want to see what I'm doing that way. So again, I know I drew my line way over here. I knew I drew that I wanted this angle up here, but I actually really like the curvature that I have right now. I think I've taken everything I want to take off here. What I'm going to do is move this back over to the bench and we're going to start hand sanding this. Let's go. We just got done doing our filing here. We're going to start doing some sanding. This nut needs to go. It's not in the way, but a lot of people tend to really force these nuts out. So I'm just going to show you real quick what I do to get nuts out. And if it goes smoothly, I'll keep it in the video. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a knife here. I got this box cutter. And I'm going to just try to slide this slowly, obviously safely, across. And I'm trying to cut any glue that is in there slightly. And I'm even going to do it on the sides here. I can feel that starting to pop up a little bit. I just stick the tip of the knife in there, get that moving a little bit. We're going to do it on this side too. You can hear that slide in there. When you pull the nut out, you can use pretty much whatever you want to use if you're not using that nut again. We're not going to use a plastic nut again. I hate plastic nuts. They always need to be lubricated. They have zero tonal qualities. Probably going to put a tusk nut in here just because it's a little less maintenance. With all that said, if you're removing a nut that is a tusk nut or a bone nut, you're not going to want to use something like this because this has teeth and it can leave marks in your nut. It was definitely going to leave marks in this one being plastic. So if you're reusing the nut, try to find something that doesn't have teeth on it that you can pull this out with a little slower. I've cut around this. This should come out fairly easily. We're gonna rock it back and forth. We're not gonna do it too much because we don't want to break the wood. You can probably hear it. And we're out. So, no damage to the wood. The nut's out. There's very little damage to the nut, but again, I don't care. On to the fun stuff that we were here for. Sanding the headstock, great. So we have basically that level edge or the beveled edge that we want. There are a couple tools that I like to use. First thing is a pretty stiff sanding block. This looks squishy, it is not. This is a nice stiff sanding block. I use this for hard, flat surfaces. Something that I also use that I don't know if this is what other people do as well, but this is a nail file which has like remove. I don't care about the different sides on it. I care about the texture of it. It's a good squishy foam block. So if I want some curvature with my sandpaper, I can use that. And that's actually what I'm gonna end up using for this. I want this to form and shape with this. So that's what this is gonna allow us to do. So here we go. Well, what kind of sandpaper are you using, Travis? Oh, I'm glad you asked. This is 220. I always buy this stuff with a P. It just means that it's gonna be more fine. They care about the actual grain a lot more. I don't remember what the P stands for. Professional, pro, I don't know. Somebody can leave that as a comment. Hey, cool. That's a good way to get comments. Not know things. And it's just gonna always be a higher grade. This is 220. It's a little lighter than I need to be, but not that I like sanding, I like being able to really control what I'm doing with the sandpaper, and starting with a 220 instead of a 120 or an 80 allows me to just do it. Is it gonna be a little more worky? Yes, but I get to put exactly what I want into this curve. So here we go. Now what we have going on is just a little bit of unevenness. We have this nice round surface here, right? And that's good. And what we're gonna do is have this come up, but we just need this all to be more, not a perfectly straight edge, but we want our angles to be nice and smooth, nice and articulate. This is pretty rough. But in order to blend all this perfectly, we need to sand this side. Remember, we didn't sand before because we didn't want to waste a bunch of time sanding, so let's actually get this nice and smooth. For this section, I'm going to use a hard sanding block. So this is not a finished product. This is our basic outline. So here's our neck front view. Here's the side. You can see the line we got on there. We have our headstock shape, and I'm really happy with how this turned out. I don't usually do these beveled edges. I think they tend to be overdone a little bit sometimes, but I really like the feel of it. I like the look of it. I think it's gonna match that offset body style really well. We still have a little bit of surface scratches in there and stuff to get rid of, but overall, this is great. It's not gonna take much sanding after this. I sand down to 320 before I paint. So we'll get rid of these little scratches here with our 320 when we're ready to actually paint this thing and we're ready to prep it for paint. Our next video is gonna be doing either the fretwork or actually replacing these frets. I still haven't made up my mind, but that is our next video. So make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, hit the bell icon. That way you get a notification when this next video goes out. Until then, we'll see you next time and keep rocking.